The Picts were a group of peoples in what is now Scotland north of the Firth of Forth in the early Middle Ages. Where they lived and details of their culture can be gleaned from early medieval texts and Pictish stones. The name Picti appears in written records as an exonym from the late 3rd century AD. They are assumed to have been descendants of the Caledonii and other northern Iron Age tribes. Their territory is referred to as Pictland by modern historians. Initially made up of several chiefdoms, it came to be dominated by the Pictish Kingdom of Fortriu from the 7th century. During this Verturian hegemony, Picti was adopted as an endonym. This lasted around 160 years until the Pictish kingdom merged with that of Dál Riata to form the Kingdom of Alba, ruled by the House of Alpin. The concept of Pictish kingship continued for a few decades until it was abandoned during the reign of Caustantín mac Áeda. Pictish society was typical of many early medieval societies in northern Europe and had parallels with neighboring groups. Archaeology gives some impression of their culture. Medieval sources report the existence of a Pictish language, and evidence shows that it was an insular Celtic language related to the Brittonic spoken by the Celtic Britons to the south. Pictish was gradually displaced by Middle Gaelic as part of the wider Gaelicization from the late 9th century. Much of their history is known from outside sources, including Bede. Hagiographies of saints such as that of Columba by Adamna and the Irish Annals. There has been substantial critical reappraisal of the concept of Pictishness over recent decades. The popular view at the beginning of the 20th century was that they were exotic lost people. It was noted in the highly influential work of 1955, The Problem of the Picts, that the subject area was difficult, with the archaeological and historical records frequently being at odds with the conventional essentialist expectations about historical peoples. Since then, the culture-historical paradigm of archaeology, dominant since the late 19th century, gave way to the processual archaeology theory. Moreover, there has been significant reappraisal of textual sources written, for example by Bede and Adamna in the 7th and 8th centuries. These works relate events of previous centuries, but current scholarship recognizes their often allegorical, pseudo-historical nature, and their true value often lies in an appraisal of the time period in which they were written. The difficulties with Pictish history and archaeology arise from the fact that the people who were called Picts were a fundamentally heterogeneous group with little cultural uniformity. Care is needed to avoid viewing them through the lens of what the cultural historian Gilbert Marcus calls the ethnic fallacy. The people known as Picts by outsiders in late antiquity were very different from those who later adopted the name, in terms of language, culture, religion, and politics. The term Pict is found in Roman sources from the end of the 3rd century AD, when it was used to describe unromanized people in northern Britain. The term is most likely to have been pejorative, emphasizing their supposed barbarism in contrast to the Britons under Roman rule. It has been argued, most notably by James Fraser, that the term Pict would have had little meaning to the people to whom it was being applied. Fraser posits that it was only adopted as an endonym in the late 7th century. As an inclusive term for people under rule of the Verturian hegemony, centered in Fortriu, the area around modern-day Inverness and Moray, particularly following the Battle of Dun-Nectane. This view is, however, not universal. Gordon Noble and Nicholas Evans consider it plausible, if not provable, that Picts may have been used as an endonym by those northern Britons in closest contact with Rome as early as the 4th century. The bulk of written history dates from the 7th century onwards. The Irish annalists and contemporary scholars like Bede use Picts to describe the peoples under the Verturian hegemony. This encompassed most of Scotland north of the Forth Clyde Isthmus and to the exclusion of territory occupied by Dál Riata in the west. To the south lay the Brittonic kingdom of Strathclyde, with Lothian occupied by Northumbrian Angles. The use of Picts as a descriptive term continued to the formation of the Alpinid dynasty in the 9th century, and the merging of the Pictish kingdom with that of Dál Riata.